Guys, just a request that if you all haven't seen this video on PN Junction Diode, I have already uploaded it. You can go, you can subscribe to the channel and go to my playlist, and in that go to semiconductor chapter. I have uploaded all the videos of semiconductor chapters. So if you all haven't seen this video PN Junction Diode, please go and see the video. It will be helpful for you all to understand what is PN Junction in forward bias and what is PN Junction in reverse bias. So what we had done in with this video was that we first take a PEV type semiconductor and the N type semiconductor. We all know that in P type semiconductor the majority charge carriers are holes, and in N type semiconductor the majority charge carriers are nothing but the electrons. When we take a semiconductor which is halfly doped with pentavalent impurity, we get N type semiconductor, that is the free electrons, and when it is doped with trivalent impurity we get positive charges known as holes. So what happens is that due to the due to opposite charges attract each other, so electrons try to move over here and holes try to move over there. So what happens is that after few time these holes, a few holes are come over here and few electrons come over here. So due to this, after certain time no more electrons will come from right side to the left side, because there is a potential barrier created by the electrons who have already passed on to the left side, which repel these electrons from coming to the left hand side. So and no more holes can come to the right hand side after certain interval of time, because there is a potential barrier created by these holes which repel these holes from coming to this side. So this barrier which does not allow the electrons and holes to move either sides is known as the potential barrier and is also called as a depletion layer. So now let's start off with the for today's topic, which is known as the forward bias. So PN junction, when placed in a forward bias mode, what happens is that we consider this. Okay, so the PN junction which has a potential barrier in between, so electrons. Okay, so guys, so this is the potential barrier. Okay, and beyond this potential barrier, these are these electrons, holes. So now when this type of semiconductor, that is the PN junction diode, is connected to the battery, what happens is, if we connect a positive terminal of the battery to the P type of the semiconductor and a negative terminal to the N type of the semiconductor, a potential difference is created. Okay, so we all know that when potential difference is created, a current flows. So in PN junction as a forward bias, how exactly the current flows is that due to the negative charge on the battery, this negative charge of the battery repels these electrons. Okay, repels these electrons, due to which these electrons which are on this left side gain more energy and are pushed and overcome these repulsive forces offered by these electrons. So as these electrons are now having greater energy than these electrons can overcome the repulsive forces offered by these electrons. So what happens is that, so more number of electrons pass over here and more number of holes travel over here. So what happens is now that on this side there are totally holes and on this side there are totally electrons. Okay, not totally exactly, but there are majority of the electrons on this side, majority of the holes on the right hand side. So now what happens is that, since electrons move from right side to the left hand side, they travel through this conductor. So they travel to this conductor. So electrons travel through this conductor and reach to the positive terminal of the battery, and the holes which are initially on the left hand side of the conductor move to the right hand side of the semiconductor. So these are the holes which have moved to the right hand side, and they will move to the negative side of the battery. Thus current is not considered to be the flow of electrons. Although the flow of electrons is from left hand side, okay, to through the positive terminal of the battery. But we all know that current is always the flow of the conventional charge, which is the positive charge. So current is considered to be the flow of positive charges. The current flows from this side. So this is the current. So flow of holes causes the current. This is what happens in forward bias, that when we connect a p-type semiconductor positive terminal of the battery to the p-type semiconductor and a negative terminal of the battery to the n-type semiconductor, these electrons overcome the repulsive forces experienced given by these electrons, and thus they flow through this conductor, and these holes which of these holes which are on the left hand side overcome the repulsive forces offered by these holes and move from the right hand side of the conductor towards the negative terminal. Now we all know that this negative charge repels the electrons, that why they move to the left hand side, okay, and this positive charge repel the holes, that's why they move to the right hand side, okay. So therefore they can overcome this repulsive force. Now what happens and we all can notice one thing, that in a forward bias condition this depletion layer gets shrinked. Please note, this is a very important point, that in a forward bias condition the depletion layer gets shrinked, and that's why there is less potential repulsive force applied to the holes and electrons, and they can easily move now in the circuit. And so electrons move from this direction and holes move from this direction. Current always move from positive to negative, that's why we take this direction of current, okay. And now what happens in the reverse bias condition? So what happens in reverse bias condition, that again we take the same PN junction. So over here there are electrons, okay, electrons, holes, okay, and these are electrons on this side, these are holes on this side, okay. So now what happens in reverse bias condition is that we, instead of connecting a positive terminal of the battery to the p-type of the semiconductor, we connect a negative terminal of the battery to the p-type semiconductor, okay, and a positive terminal to the n-type semiconductor. Initially what we did in forward bias was that we connected a positive terminal of the battery to the p-type semiconductor and negative terminal of the battery to the n-type semiconductor. So in reverse bias we do exactly the opposite of it. We connect a negative terminal of the battery to the p-type of the semiconductor and positive terminal of the battery to the n-type of the semiconductor, okay. So now what happens is that this the negative terminal will try to attract these holes, and this positive terminal will try to attract these electrons. Since the electrons are attracted to the right hand side and holes are attracted to the left hand side, so what happens is that the width of this potential barrier increases. Why it increases now is that because the electrons are experiencing force away from the center, and these holes are experiencing force away from the center. So no one is trying to overcome this potential barrier. Instead they are just going away from this potential barrier, they are moving away, okay. If they would have been moving in the opposite direction, what would have been happened is that they would have tried to overcome this potential barrier, and this potential barrier would have reduced to a smaller size. But now no one is trying to overcome these forces. This potential barrier gains the upper hand and becomes more bigger. So as it becomes more bigger, no electrons and holes are trying to flow this potential barrier, and thus no current is induced in this type when a PN junction is placed in a forward bias conditions. So when we apply a negative terminal of the battery to the p-type semiconductor and a positive terminal of the battery to the n-type semiconductor, what happens is that the electrons are attracted towards the positive terminal, thus the electrons move away from the center, and holes are attracted away from the center, and they, because of this negative terminal, and due to this no one is trying to overcome this potential barrier. So the potential barrier is not experiencing any forces from side, and thus the potential barrier does not shrink. Instead it becomes more bigger, because there is no one to oppose this potential barrier, and this potential barrier gains the upper hand, and thus no current flows in forward biased condition. Thank you. Please subscribe to the channel, because very soon I'm going to upload all the videos of 11th and 12th science as well as engineering, physics, chemistry and mechanics. Do like the videos, share and comment below if I could do anything better.